we are tackling the ugly and often, well, the subject that very few people want to talk about. Tribalism, negative ethnicity, all of that. What makes a patriot? Leadership, nationhood. And who better to talk about these subjects than the Ungwana man himself, Ken Jiru, right here next to me. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you.
And on the far end, Change Associates, Gunjiri Wambogo. Good to see you, my brother.
Good to see you, Jeff.
Twitter handles are at Gunjiri Wambogo, at Ungwana Kenya. Mine is at Koinange Jeff. The hashtag is JKL. Let's get tweeting. Let's get talking. And gentlemen, let's start with the topic. You know, Mpekatoni, for what it is. And a lot of people have been very afraid to say it for what it is. And let's face it, it was Kikuyus being attacked. Ken, let's just face it.
Well, the initial attack was Kikuyus being attacked, and I think for obvious reasons, you know, many Kikuyus are basically settled there, and also for the fact that it's not a new story. I mean, people have talked about Mpekatoni for very long. And in my mind, it is connected to the whole the whole concern, should I say, from the coastal people about the whole question of land. And so it then did appear that somebody decided now that the way to resolve it is to do it physically
and use it as a political tool,
and use it as a political tool, which is, I think, very sad and short-termism and short-sighted, because that doesn't get anybody anywhere.
Yeah,
I keep on saying that you may be able to take something from somebody today, but they'll still get it back. Look at the story of Amin and the Asians in Uganda. And I think whereas there may be legitimate concerns about land, how we deal with them will be of paramount importance.
Yeah.
And for me, we must do it in an Ungwana way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gunjiri, you got attacked by calling it what it is.
Yes. I remember I got into trouble because I said that this was a deliberate attack on members of one community, which was a Kikuyu. So I started being told that no, 30% of the people who died were not Kikuyu. And it really irritated me, because I kept saying, so 60%, 70% of the people who died are Kikuyu. So I was being told, no, these are Kenyans, why are you tribalizing the issue? And I kept saying, no, we need to understand. Somebody sat down and deliberately targeted to go and attack a place where people from one community come from. Why did he do it? What was the message he was trying to send? And it was in the middle of all manner of political rhetoric that was going around. You know? And for me, our inability to actually face up to the realities of our ethnicity, to call it as it is. Because you see, when people are attacked in Northeastern, we need to say the Gabra are fighting with. And because that's how you start solving the problem. You start understanding, so why are the Gabra fighting with the Borana? What is the issue? When you say Kenyans are fighting, it becomes, you can't solve that problem. When you say Kikuyus have been attacked, or Kikuyus have attacked a place, then you're halfway. You've called it, so you're halfway through getting a solution for it. And this is something that Kenyans need to learn, because we assume that when you say that, you're a tribalist. Correct. But it's a fact. I mean, it's right there.
Yeah, and Ken, why are we so afraid? Why has this country reached a stage where we're so afraid to say what we are? We're so afraid of our ethnicity, because you will be branded. You will be called your TNA, your Jubilee, your Cord, you're that.
Hypocrisy, bigotry, sophistry, that is basically driven by our leaders. If you look at, for instance, generally across the board, what we may call the political formations, they are basically formed on the basis of communities. But nobody wants to call it like you're saying. Everybody wants to say we are democratic. Everybody wants to say we are talking in the name of the people. And you see, one of the things that happens, for instance, if you're an alcoholic, and you walk into an alcoholic anonymous, you must be able to confess and say and agree that I'm alcoholic. Otherwise, they won't even allow you to sit in the room. And I think it is time Kenyans accepted that we have a tribal problem, so that the minute you call it as it is, you're called a tribalist. And as Gunjiri is saying, you see, the problems we would have across the world, right from the days of the Jews through to what happened in Rwanda, Tutsis and Hutu.
Yeah.
People refused to call it. But underground, on those days, I don't think it was Twitter, but underground, they were calling certain communities cockroaches. And so for me, when we see political rallies and people go on and on about two communities, before it was one community. During the last general election, it was 007. It was about 41
versus 1
against 1, and we saw the results of that.
Yeah.
And I think it is high time we stood our grounds as Kenyans, by the way, and said we all have a right to be here. No community is more important than the other, and so no community should be attacked by anybody. And again, this is not a unique thing to Kenya, by the way, but how we resolve it determines whether this nation will stand or collapse. Look at Sudan. Again, two communities fighting. Look at Nigeria. Again, despite the fact that we're talking about Boko Haram, they've always had their own internal conflicts. There was a time they were talking about the Igbo. And you remember again, I think the Kikuyus are in trouble. There was a time we were told to lie low like envelopes. And so it continues going until a point in time when we will mature, get to a point of maturity and say, everybody has a right to be here. Everybody has a right to be respected. Everybody has a right to opportunities. But most fundamentally, we must demand it of the political class to rise in terms of ideological consciousness, because like I've said before, Jeff, on this bench, when we lack ideological clarity, when we are not engaging on the basis of ideas, when we are not talking about the different types of economic setups that we can have, then we regress to the lowest common denominator. And majority of our leaders, by the way, are what I may call shenzi thinkers. They'll tell you, oh, the Kikuyu are coming. Oh, the Luo are coming. Oh, the Kalenjin are coming. But ultimately, and for me, this is a challenge I am throwing out to what I call now, what we call the digital leadership that we are seeing. Ultimately, the fundamental transformation of this country will come when we have a leadership that is able to get people to jump over their shadow.
Are we going to be long dead by then?
No.
It's in our lifetime.
It's in our lifetime.
Kunjiri,
yes.
The leaders we are electing, even now, right now, those ones running for by-election,
yes,
they're already preaching hate. They're already preaching that negative ethnicity. What is that? And they'll probably end up in government.
I got into trouble because when Moses Kuria said he wants to run for MP, and he had all these cases over him about hate speech, and I said, you know what? That guy needs to go into parliament. And everybody was like, now Gunjiri has become the Kikuyu. But you see, what I was saying is, Moses, you see the things we're talking about, guys calling each other cockroaches in the back door. Let's mainstream that conversation. There's no need of only hearing one side from Jacoyo Midio or Mudama. Let's hear Moses. Let it be mainstream in national public, because that's how you start disentangling it. That's how you start disenfranchising some of the things and beliefs that we have. Kenyans believe Kikuyus are like this, Luos are like this. Say it. And I'm actually getting to the point I'm starting to say that maybe we need to get rid of this, or to put them on our back door for these hate speech laws. Because some of the things we're saying, when you say that I can't say it, I'll say it to Ken quietly, I'll say it to you quietly, I'll just not say it publicly. But once you say it publicly, somebody will come and challenge you. When you say that government is only made up of two communities. And I remember I actually had a moment on KTN with the former speaker, the former deputy speaker. And that is the time when Code was going around saying that the security agents, security apparatus of the country is being run by two communities. And I started counting. We've got Rachel Omamo, we've got Kimayo, and I counted for them. But you see, if they had not said that, it would not have been challenged. And the minute it was challenged, it refused.
So that reverse psychology, you think it works?
I mean, we've reached a point where, what are our options? You see, pretending that we are not saying it doesn't mean we're not saying it.
And that, Ken, he has a point there, because denial, as in alcoholism you just mentioned, denial is the first stage.
Is the first stage.
And we're always in denial.
And if you continue in denial, it will kill you. You'll die of liver cirrhosis, so to speak, or some other alcohol-related disease. But let me say this. Let me underline the fact that what is happening in Kenya is not unique. I mean, this is what Hitler built his party on. The hatred of the Jews. The Jews were crucified. Everything that happened that was bad was the Jews. And so what happened? 6 million of them were killed. So it's not new. And for me, any leader, I'm going back, and as I say this, I really would like the leadership of this country, especially those who run with the tribal card, to reflect on what they are doing to this nation. And in my mind, again, I'm clear that we must ascend When I talk about ascending spiritually, what I mean is, when I usually talk about Ungwana spirituality, and by that what I mean is the search and outcome for the ultimate meaning and purpose of your life. Once you understand what it is, then it doesn't matter whether somebody's a Luo or a Kisii or an Indian, you know. Back in about, I think it was 1965, Julius Nyerere, and it's, by the way, it's on Twitter. He was an eloquent orator.
Yes.
He was talking about the Tanzanians, and the Tanzanians were fighting the Zanzibaris and the Watanganyika. And so Nyerere was telling them that leo mutatuambia tupige Wazanzibari. Tukimaliza na Wazanzibari, basi tutaangalia nani mwingine tutatafuna. Tutatafuna Wanyika, alafu tutatafuna sijui nani, alafu Nyerere says, ironically he says, na mimi naomba mutafutane, you eat each other until you finish each other. But you see, Nyerere could see it.
Yeah.
And so he managed to maneuver this whole thing to the extent that, Tanzania became Tanzania. I want to give the nation a story. And I'm not sure whether you gentlemen have watched the movie Invictus.
Indeed.
Invictus is about Mandela. Mandela becomes president of the Republic of South Africa, a nation that has been polarized over the years, black and
years
white.
Plus, yeah.
And then, by the way, when I talk about the leadership lifting a country, to jump over its shadow, and when I talk about the question of, spirituality, you see it in this movie, Invictus. Mandela comes in and he looks for that thing that can unite the South Africans. And what does he land on?
Rugby. Of all sports.
Of all sports.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is not even played by
Blacks.
Africans. In fact, they hate the Springboks because the Springboks is full of white people.
And it represented apartheid.
Yes. And it had one black African.
Yes.
And you remember the black leaders saying, no, this is the time to kill the Springboks. And Mandela literally walking into the South African Sports Association after they had actually proscribed Springboks, and saying, you cannot do that. And telling them that, when a man has, when you cannot take what somebody really values, and that when a person is down, you don't kanyangia them chini. And then you see Mandela calling them Mzungu, captain. And I remember the scene when he was asked to go and meet Mandela. Yes. And he was not sure why he's going to meet Mandela. Yeah. And when he comes out of Mandela's office, he's in the car with his wife, and the wife asked him, so what did he want? Yeah. And you can see the South African captain really looking puzzled, saying, I think he wants us to win the World Cup. And by the way, South Africa had been rated as the least possible country to win the World Cup. Yeah. And Mandela, of course, continues putting fire into these people, calling in the sports minister, and you remember he even sent them Kosi Sikeleli as a unifying song. Yeah. And they refused to sing. In fact, they crumpled it and threw it away and said, this belongs to the terrorists. But the net effect of what Mandela did was, finally, the South African team got to the finals. And I remember, the South African nation, everybody was cheering, even the blacks, cheering 14 white people and one black person.
Yeah. Chester Williams.
Yes, Chester Williams.
Yes.
And I remember the white team singing Nkosi Sikeleli, Africa. Can you imagine what would have happened in Kenya? Oh, that team is full of Kambas. We are going to call a referendum. We must dialogue.
We need 1 million signatures.
Whatever it is.
Yes. The best part of the movie, and I don't want to digress, but we have to summarize this movie by saying, when the commentator came up to Francois Pina, the captain, says, what does it feel like to have 62,000 people cheering you today?
Cheering you today. Yeah.
He says, it's not 62,000.
Yes.
We've got 40
million South Africans.
Oh.
Yes. And by the way, in the movie, if you remember again, the black people, when Mandela became president, of course the blacks ran to became his security guys. And when they asked for more security guys, white guys were brought. And the black security guys were saying, how can you bring those guys? They're the terrorists. And Mandela said, change must start here.
Yeah.
And so for me, what I'm telling this country, and what I'm telling the leadership of this country, is that we must understand that some of us who, by the way, see themselves, because in this country there are some people who think they're on the stage of Mandela, who see themselves at that level, then they must start understanding and appreciating that it will take a lot of spiritual firepower to ride over this nonsense of kabila mbili ama tatu ama nne. And let me tell you something. Today wanaweza kutafuna, kama Nyerere says, wanaenda kutafuna Wakikuyu. Kesho wataanza kutafuna, wakimaliza Wakikuyu na Wakalenjin, wataanza kutafuta Wahindi. Wataanza kusema, oh, they own industries, oh, they own shops, oh, they own this, because that's how it happens. But when you ascend and refuse to go into those holes, then you understand that every human being, big, small, fat, tall, thin, has a right to be in this country.
Absolutely. And Gunjiri, with your
I just
change
feel
associate...
like this guy has just preached a sermon, man.
I'm about to say hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
But Gunjiri,
Yes.
with your change associates, can this, what Ken is saying, which is so fundamental and so simplistic, if you will,
Yes.
can we adopt that? Can we become that?
We started a program called Ukenya. And what we were saying is that we were calling Ukenya. See, we talk about Ukenya, Ukenya, Ubuntu,
Okay.
looking for the spirit. You know, he talks about spirituality.
Yes.
I understand what it means to be a Kikuyu. I'll meet a guy who understands what it means to be a Luo. But we have not defined what the spirit of being a Kenyan is. And we're saying we want to look for the spirit. We actually want to look for moments that make us feel Kenyan and celebrate them and keep expanding them and hope that they'll keep connecting into each other to the point where we actually have a continuous movement of Kenyanness, you know, and it's difficult. It's difficult because of what Ken is talking about. That our leaders we have leaders who grow or thrive on dividing us.
Yeah.
And telling us you're in this position because those guys have done. You're in this position, and they play us against each other. When you meet certain leaders, meet in one group of people, they tell you, you know, those guys are saying that you guys are like this. This is a thing personally, I feel Ken is one step ahead from us. Personally, I feel we first need to get this elephant, put it in the middle of the room, and say, this is the elephant. This is how it looks.
Yeah.
And this is what we're going to do with it.
Call it for what it is.
Call it for what it is, and then go beyond it. I keep hearing people saying, let's replace tribalism with Kenyanness. We cannot. I will not stop being a Kikuyu. But I want to be more than just a Kikuyu. I want to be a Kenyan. I want to join with you.
Mungwana Kikuyu, not a Mushenzi Kikuyu.
Why is it we cheer Collins Injera, Humphrey Khayange, you know, Biko Atema?
But by the way, whenever
Kemboy.
when Kemboy is running,
When he's doing that thing of his,
we are all up.
Well, can you
we
do
all do that dance.
And
we do the Kemboy.
And I've said many times, Jeff, if today you enter the matatu, you don't start asking who's the driver. I mean, in this hotel, when you're getting food from you don't ask who cooked it. And that's why sometimes I hazard to say that we really don't have a tribal problem. We have tribal leaders who use us as gunpowder. You know, put it in the gun and it goes off. He says, can you hear those numbers? I'm bringing them to your doorstep. If you don't give me what I want. We really, inherently, we don't have a problem, right? But I want to say something, Gunjiri, maybe just to stretch what you're saying a bit more. I'm not sure that it is really in cutting up the carcass that will give us the type of healing that we need, as opposed to just ascending. You know when you ascend, when I'm using the word spiritually, then you start understanding what it means to be human, and then that the Ubuntu in East Africa we call it Utu, and that is why on the Ungwana platform I say Ungwana ni Utu, Ushenzi Unyama. And I've said many times that a dog has two eyes like you, Jeff, two nostrils like you, it has a mouth like you, it has a backbone, it has a heart, but you've been given a consciousness by God. And the human being is the only animal who can descend to the level of a dog, but a dog cannot rise to a level of a human being. We've been given that consciousness, and we've been given dominion of the animals, to rule them, to name them. But the human being very easily becomes an animal. And that is why I call them Al-Shabaab, call them whatever you're calling them, call them Mongiki. When a man cuts another man's throat or a woman's throat, he's no longer a human being, that is an animal. Huyo ni munyama.
Ushenzi.
Ushenzi. You cannot justify and say because of religion, because you took my land. And let me tell you something, even this whole question of land, by the way, the minute you ascend, it becomes, you understand that that's not your essence. Look at Singapore, 700 square kilometers, the size of Nairobi.
Correct.
It's a superpower in terms of, or rather it's a middle-level income country.
Yeah.
Why? People use their brains. People use their brains. But what are you doing in Kenya? Doing some funny arithmetic. How many Luos? How many Kikuyus? And you know the irony of this whole situation, Jeff, is if I'm today I'm appointed chairman of the Constitutional Implementation Committee, what I get is mine and my wife's. I don't understand how the Kikuyu come in. I don't understand how the Luos come in.
Right. But all of a sudden,
you're a Kikuyu
who's chairman.
And arithmetic is done.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, we are the people who are pushing this type of politics are basically taking us backwards in the should I say while they are thinking that they are taking us forward.
I'd like to use a good example.
Go on.
Yeah.
Olelenku.
Yeah.
We all have been having this moment about Olelenku and security and all. And it was interesting watching how God spent 2 weeks calling him a cook until they had to go to Ntulele for a rally. And then all of a sudden he was a good guy.
Yeah.
There was nothing wrong with him.
Yeah.
It is everything to do with his boss.
Correct. They pulled back whatever it is.
And you see,
The true
and
impeachment, it was votes.
And my problem is, and this is where my problem comes in,
Yeah.
we've gotten to the point where we can't even fix problems. Because now if you go after Kimayo, Kalenjis are going to wake up and say, that is our person. If you go after Olelenku, if you go after Kimemia, if you go after Ruto or Uhuru, and I keep saying, look, if you have a problem with a guy, you have a problem with that guy, not his community, not his family, just him. But it was for me, it was ironical watching CORD leadership standing up in Ntulele and saying the way Lenku is a decent chap, he's an amazing guy.
All of a sudden.
2 weeks ago they were calling him a cook.
Yeah. And saying
But
he's
just
only good for Muhammadi and chapatis.
they need to have a rally where they're not going to get chased out.
Hypocrisy.
Where the massa is, they're going to
Hypocrisy.
Gentlemen,
Terrible.
that's good part. That's a good point to take a break and come back, because we're calling it for what it is.
Yeah.
If it looks like a duck,
Walks like a duck.
It
It's
is
a
a
duck.
duck.
It's a duck, man.
And speaking of ducks, the Twitter handle is @Gunjiru Wambogo, @Ungwana Kenya, @Koinange Jeff, hashtag is JKL. We are taking off the gloves. We are peeling back the mask. We are calling tribalism for what it is, because at the end of the day, patriotism is what we should be all about. Jeff Koinange is literally on fire. Somebody call Reki. Are they Kikuyus? Probably. Back in a moment.
Reke.